Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life. We are at episode 39 of our podcast and I am joined as per usual, by my co-host, Bally. It would probably be good to introduce myself as well. Hi, I'm NBZ by the way. Bally, how are you? How are you doing? Hello?
Hi. I just
What?
wanted to see what would happen. I was doing what Guillaume did that time on our thing. It was quite...
I was like, has my internet disconnected? God damn
I
it.
don't know, I just wanted to see what would happen. Maybe I should have held off for longer. But yeah, I couldn't hold it anymore. Hi,
Okay.
I'm here. Yes. No.
Are we going to keep that in?
Yeah, why
Okay.
not? It was fun.
Alright,
Yeah.
welcome to the podcast. Oh, jeez, we just broke all professionalism completely. But hey, here we are. This is this week's podcast. And Bally, why don't you?
Johnny and Menace recovered a lot quicker than you did.
I was just flustered. I have no idea. So anyway, Bally, how about you tell the fine folks at
Sure.
home what bloody nonsense we're going to be getting up to today?
We're going to tell you what we've been playing. We've got plenty of emails, and then a topic that is being bandied about a lot for a long time now, and the topic is whether gaming is a sport. So we're going to have a little discussion about it, and then from that discussion, hopefully stem out into sort of geekdom and nerd culture and how that relates to the mainstream media. When is it criticized? When is it championed? That sort of thing. So it might be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, very kind of industry-centric thing. I feel like Nintendo don't really fit into that sphere so much, but we'll relate it to them, and then we'll mention stuff when that comes to pass. So look forward to that in the last part of the show. But as you already mentioned, Bally, we are going to start things off by talking about the things that we've been playing, and we've both been playing a brand new thing, an update to an old game. So how about you tell the folks about that?
We have been enjoying very much so the new Mario Kart DLC. So this is pack 2 with 8 new tracks, 3 new characters, and also free DLC for anyone who doesn't download the other DLC, which you should do anyway because it's amazing, is the extra add-on of having 200cc.
Yes, a brand new speed for Mario Kart. I feel very F-Zero inspired, and that is kind of the vibe I get from this Mario Kart, especially now that we have both DLC packs out and this new speed. It seems like Nintendo have said, you know what, F-Zero, probably not going to happen again, but we can give the fans nods,
Is that
winks.
the stance you're taking? Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because they've said, here's Mute City, here's Big Blue, here's the Blue Falcon, here's a sped up Mario Kart. Is that teasing that they might do F-Zero, or is this a little token of this is all you're gonna get now? Bugger off.
So for me, I think I take the latter stance in that we've heard so frequently from people like Miyamoto saying, well, yeah, we could do a new F-Zero game, but we'd need to have something interesting to do it with, like a new controller or something. And just those comments just indicate to me that they're not interested in doing F-Zero because, first of all, it's not a moneymaker. Second of all, it probably would require a lot of resources. Those games are very pretty. They run really well. They'd have to put a big studio on it, and I don't think that they want to put those resources towards an F-Zero. And you just take a look at Mario Kart 8. It has anti-gravity. It has this new speed, which is extremely quick. They've added 2 tracks from the F-Zero series, and, you know, to top it all off, addition of the Blue Falcon, there's even the Captain Falcon Mii suit. For all intents and purposes, this is going beyond fan service. I think this is like a little bit further than just, you know, a tip of the hat. This is a taking the hat off and throwing it across the room, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to fight the corner of the other side because I am quite confident, and I don't think it's just me being a fanboy, but maybe it is subconsciously that I do think F-Zero is coming at some point, and I think that, like, why would you release DLC of a game that's not been out in so long, knowing that it would appeal to a fan base if you're not going to make another F-Zero game? it's hard to articulate, but I do think it's crazy that they would go so far to not just go the full hog and say, you know what, let's do an F-Zero game.
I can kind of buy that argument in the same way that Sakurai talked about how Smash Brothers characters were, a lot of them decided by the fact of whether they were going to continue a series and have another entry in them. And, we hear of things like Ice Climbers getting cut, obviously for technical reasons with the 3DS version, but also, Ice Climbers are kind of a done franchise. That's a classic Nintendo thing that they probably will not revisit, so it's not a huge deal if they're not in the game, because they're not needed to kind of promote upcoming material, whereas Captain Falcon's still in there. He's a core tenant of Nintendo franchises, and there's no other F-Zero representation, but if anything, it at least confirms to people that they still are wary that it's around.
It's nice that it's in their minds, and it's just about how long can it stay within their minds before they say cut it. And it'll be interesting, and I don't think this E3 will necessarily have all the answers. I don't think just because F-Zero doesn't come this E3 means it's gone forever. I think there's still a chance, but anyway, this has become a massive F-Zero debate.
Right, it's a huge tangent.
Mario
Let's
Kart
get back
DLC.
to the point. So, Bally, what do you think of the new tracks and stuff that we've got?
I could not be happier. I think they are a stronger batch overall than the previous set. I absolutely love Big Blue without meaning to dive back into an F-Zero discussion, because that is just such a great track. It looks so beautiful. I think
and boy, that jazz rendition
Yes.
of the Big Blue music, stunning, so good. Both tracks, the F-Zero tracks, have fantastic music. When you take those and throw it into the Mario Kart style that they've adopted for Mario Kart 8, with all these jazz instruments and just this fantastic, wonderful kind of orchestral sound in the background, amazing. And the track itself is gorgeous. It's one of the long ones, so it has 3 stops to it instead of being laps, which I love. Those tracks, I think they're really interesting because they can do so much more with the design and change it up and make it feel fresh. Like when you go through it, you're not like repeating the same stuff again and again. And I'm a big fan of Big Blue, despite the fact that I didn't like the Smash Brothers stage. But that's a completely different beast, obviously.
Yeah, completely different. I also think that the reintroduction of Baby Park is great. I know a lot of fans wanted that. I like it. I'm not like a massive, Baby Park evangelist, which I know there's plenty of out there. But I do think it's good fun every now and then. It's sort of like every time you start that race, it feels like you're just rolling the dice and seeing what happens, and it's just an absolute chaos. And
I feel like Baby Park is the epitome of just throwing everything in the hat and just like tipping it out and seeing where the chips land, because quite honestly, I don't think you can employ that much skill in going around Baby Park. It is very luck-based, obviously.
And Johnny Metz made a great point, saying, "Who needs a battle mode when you can have Baby Park?" It just becomes almost like a battle mode. It's just absolute chaos.
Right, you feel like the spirit of battle mode is alive, despite the fact that battle mode is terrible in this game. The fact that Baby Park exists to kind of give you that same chaotic feel is wonderful, and it's always been a fan favorite, and it's kind of weird because it's not the most interesting of track designs. It's probably the least interesting track design in the series.
Yeah.
It's literally a circle,
and that's what makes it so great.
Right, and that's the thing. It's like you go round it 7 times and it's really short, and it's just about turning corners constantly and trying to avoid shit because there's so many items everywhere, just laden with bananas, shells flying. It's yes, it is pure chaos theory in Mario Kart.
Are there any other standout tracks in your mind from the new DLC? You're not a big fan of the Animal Crossing one, are you?
Well, I initially I didn't like it that much, and I still don't think it's super great. Just from a design standpoint, I don't think it does too much interesting. Like, there's no kind of... I mean, you just basically go off ramps. That's like the only kind of weird like addition. The trees are there and there's a lot of aesthetic nods. I think the nice thing about it is obviously it changes the season every time you play on it, so the track does look different, and they actually do move ramps around as kind of the seasons shift forward. So the ones that are in the river initially in the summertime are no longer there, and then you have more in the winter, like at the start of the race and everything. So it's okay, I just don't think it's a very strong or interesting one, and I think they could have done a bit more with it. I imagine, like, with an Animal Crossing track, maybe at least racing through one of the houses or racing through Tom Nook's establishment, the museum, past Blathers, like past some of these skeletons. I think they could have done some really interesting stuff, but it's all outside and it's all kind of, the stuff that is to do with wandering around the outside of the town, which, fine, be it as it may, but I think they definitely could have pushed the envelope there. The real ones that stand out to me are the GBA remake of Ribbon Road, which I never knew about Ribbon Road.
Yes, I was just about to say that.
I never knew about Ribbon Road before because I never played the GBA game. I have it on the Ambassador program on 3DS, but quite frankly, I do not want to go back to that game at all.
It is not worth. It is a bad game. I'm a massive Mario Kart fan, and that is a bad, bad, bad Mario Kart.
Yeah, so obviously they did basically a complete overhaul. This is pretty much, for all intents and purposes, a new track because
just like Cheeseland.
Right, both of those tracks from GBA, but are obviously completely different because the GBA is so simple and boiled down and
two-dimensional, flat.
Yeah, obviously very flat. Not much interesting happening. So Ribbon Road is awesome. It's really got that Toy Story feel to it, and it has a bunch of Nintendo Easter eggs in it as well. If you watch the track while it is, the pre-race kind of swooping camera angles, I saw a Yarn Yoshi amiibo on a shelf. Like, they threw that in there, and that's really cool. I just love those nods. I think all the stuff involved with Ribbon Road is amazing. So yeah, big fan of that.
There's actually one Easter egg that Game Explain raised. Now, this is really technical, but there's a poster on the wall of Lakitu, and it says, Kung Fu Lakitu, and he's in the same pose as Kung Fu Panda from the DreamWorks film. And then if you go to the...
Don't you mean Kung Fu? I think you're confusing Kong. Yeah, like Donkey Kong.
Kung Fu.
Kung Fu.
The Nintendo style of Kung Fu.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
No,
sure.
I made that up, not Nintendo.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought maybe it was Kung Fu because it was a Nintendo version.
No, I was wrong. It is Kung Fu.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you go to the Lakitu track from the first DLC pack, there's actually wallpaper of Lakitu in that exact same pose painted onto the walls of Ribbon Road. It's just like a little reference thing, but I think in general that track Ribbon Road just shows, and you mentioned it, MBZ, Toy Story, if you think Disney are good at world creation, this is Nintendo just giving Disney a massive middle finger, saying, you know what, we can do world creation too. Look at this. We can incorporate all our franchises into this one magical track. Look at this. And it really is stunning. It is spectacular. I think Chris Scullion tweeted a picture of this, former O&M journalist that we enjoy following, from Scotland. So he tweeted a picture of this about a week before the DLC came out, and I was shocked, absolutely stunned at how beautiful the track just looks, and it is great to play as well. It's incredibly smooth and definitely probably my favorite after Big Blue of the 8 new tracks.
Yeah, it just brims with character, and I think that's a big part of the aesthetic appeal of a lot of these Mario Kart tracks. A couple of other notable ones. I really like Wild Woods, which is an outdoor kind of you're in kind of jungle setting with waterfalls and stuff. That's really great, and I think that's a favorite I'll go back to. And Super Bell Subway is another standout track. I think that one's very interesting as well. So yeah, some good stuff. Do you like the other ones, Bally? I think those are the strong suits. Cheeseland is kind of a standard desert one. I can't remember many of the others.
I mean, as much as I dislike Super Mario Circuit, Cheeseland is quite special to me in a way because it is so cool playing on these tracks that were originally two-dimensional, like you said before, and just completely turned into 3D. So I do actually quite like Cheeseland. I agree with you. I'm not the biggest fan of desert tracks. Wild Woods, you're right, is a great track. I think Nintendo have just decided that Shy Guys like living vertically now because it almost reminds me of Shy Guy Falls. You see lots of Shy Guys just living Ewoks up in the trees, and it's
yeah, pretty
it's
much.
Right, we just stuck them up in the trees. It's crazy. Let's just make a Shy Guy village up in the trees. So I love that. That's really innovative and a cool idea. So yeah, great batch of tracks.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we have to talk about is the distinct difference that 200cc makes to this game.
Yes.
Because, quite frankly, like, okay, so here's with my thoughts when the Nintendo Direct thing was announced. Was like, oh, all right, it's a new speed, whatever.
I wasn't
As
at all.
soon as soon as they started playing the trailer for it, and as soon as I started playing it when I got the DLC, holy shit, the game is fast. Like, my god, I was playing Mute City on 200cc's, and I was almost being sick because of the G-forces that were being exerted
Get the sick
through my
bags.
screen. Absolutely. It is astonishingly fast, and to a degree where it makes the game have to be played in a style which is so different to what you're used to with Mario Kart.
Yes.
Which really changes things up and almost makes it a brand new game, which is fascinating that simply upping the speed another 50cc's has done all that to the game.
It makes it completely different. I have a number of points I want to say on 200cc. First of all, it makes it different to the point where there's now a new technique of drifting. So while you're drifting, it is advised on tight corners to put just rotate your thumb onto the brake, and you just need a bit of friction just to get yourself around that corner. Like, there are numerous tracks where there are corners where you need to do that. Otherwise, you simply just fly off the side. Like, it's not even, there's no bones about it. You're going to fly off the side. You really have to control. There's a real, now an added skill in cornering, and the emphasis on apexes and where you go in and come out of corners is so much more emphasized.
You really need to just feather the B button while
Exactly,
you're skidding
feather
around.
the B button. That's exactly what you need to do. And it's like, I think I've got the hang of it now, and it is super satisfying when you nail a lap and you get every single corner right. And that feeling is so much like F-Zero. It's unreal. Sorry to bring up F-Zero yet again, but that's where there's sort of a flaw with 200cc, because with F-Zero you might do a really bad lap. You'll bump off people. You might have fallen off the track. It's not going well. You can then decide. You can just decide. Right, I'm going to focus. And when I'm focusing playing F-Zero, I'm going to absolutely nail every single corner. And as a reward, you will march your way up the field, and you'll win races. If you focus and drive well, you will win races. That is not the case at all in Mario Kart 8, because
Well, because it's fucking Mario Kart and there's
exactly.
items everywhere, and you're gonna get blue shelled and hit bananas and question
It's
blocks.
frustrating because 200cc's emphasizes the driving and the emphasis on skill and momentum and working your way up a pack, and it's just really, it completely knocks the stuffing out of you when you get hit by a red shell or a blue shell on 200cc, and that is a downside that you just kind of grit your teeth and get on with it with Mario Kart, because that's the game. But I mean, that's part of the reason why I want F-Zero so much, because it rewards driving skill, and ultimately I do like a bit of driving, and I do love that is now a bigger factor in Mario Kart with the new 200cc DLC.
Yeah, I have to say that there is no bigger kind of depressing moment in Mario Kart than when you hit a stop in 200cc's. The loss of momentum is
It's like
immeasurable.
Kicked in the balls.
Really is. Like, and then you have to try and get back up there, and it does take a little while, but you're soon back. It's just like the dichotomy between the speed you're going at and the stopping speed is just like, I can't. It just makes me feel uneasy. But hey, that's what comes with it, and that's why you need to practice and get good. Get good, bitch, because Mario Kart. That's how you play.
Hey, I beat you in that tournament we did.
Yeah, you did indeed. But I'm no self-confessed Mario Kart expert. I take.
I am, and that is why getting good at 200cc is actually feels like a bit of homework I need to do, because I want to get good. I love it.
Well, there we go. I'm sure we'll talk more about Mario Kart in the future. It's obviously it's kind of an evergreen Nintendo title. We'll always go back to it.
Hopefully, do more tournaments. That was really good fun.
Yeah, we did. We did a fun one. So for now, Bally, how about you tell us about some other video games you've been playing?
So I'll briefly mention I've started A Link to the Past.
Excellent. Very good.
I already know quite a lot about this game just from, I don't know, internet, being a Nintendo fan. It's an absolute classic that almost every Nintendo fan has played apart from me. And yeah, like the number of games we go back to MBZ that you know, the classics that we sort of missed out on for one reason or another. Well, we weren't. Well, we were alive at the time, but we were like one or like zero.
Right.
So we've only just come back to these games now, and it's just a super solid Zelda, like really, really solid. I really like it. It's much, much, much harder than something like Link Between Worlds, but I think it feels far more like traditional Zelda than Link's Awakening did. Link's Awakening, I felt it's a crazy game. It's a really, really crazy game. I think there's an awful lot more to do.
I mean, the whole premise of it is that it's basically a dream. So, you know,
True.
they throw Mario characters in there, and like you have weird side-scrolling segments.
Yeah, no,
you have an
absolutely.
item that lets you jump, which is ridiculous. So, for many reasons, Link's Awakening is an odd Zelda.
Yeah, and I really hope you do play it at some point, MBZ, because it is completely different. And I will admit that there's a lot more of a rigmarole to get to between dungeons and Link's Awakening. I feel like there's a lot to do, whether it's, I don't want to use the word fetch quest because it's not quite that negative and bad. It's actually good fun in Link's Awakening. But Link to the Past, I feel like it's not as fast paced as Link Between Worlds. Certainly not. I think I'm about 3 to 4 hours in, and I've done 3 dungeons. And I think by that time in Link Between Worlds, I'd done a bit more. But it's really just really solid. Really like it. I do think it is incredibly punishing for in a number of ways. One way that's really punishing is to get to the bloody Tower of Hera. Like, I was just playing it the other night, and I was like, I don't want to use a guide. I don't want to use a guide. I don't want to use a guide. I have no idea how to get to this tower. I have no idea how to get to this tower. What do I do? And for whatever reason, I had no idea that the first time you go to the Dark World that you're a bunny rabbit. I was completely shocked. I was like, what
Wow.
is this? And like, I wander around, and I'm like, great. I'm stuck in the Dark World. How do I get back? How do I get back?
I'm stuck in the Dark World, and I'm a rabbit.
Exactly.
What the shit?
I didn't even know how to get back, and yeah, you have to use the mirror, and then you have to basically you have to use the mirror in the right spot that basically.
Right, so that you're up on a cliff in the other
Exactly,
world.
and I think
yeah.
that's a really kind of shitty mechanic. I don't really like that.
I think it's quite obscure, and
Yeah.
you do need to. It doesn't super well explain to you how it works and how you're supposed to be using it. And I think A Link to the Past is kind of riddled with a lot of that, but it is kind of more of that old school mentality. It feels like a lot of a lot of kind of design choices from the original Zelda maybe are a bit more present here than they were in the later kind of 3D ones, where it's more obscure and you don't know what to do as much.
Yeah, but if you take a step back of that item, the mirror, it is actually almost doing the same thing that of the mechanic of going into the wall and going into the portals of Link Between Worlds. It's just not quite as streamlined. It felt far more streamlined in Link Between Worlds, and that just really like, this game is the same age as me, and that really shows how games have evolved. But I tell you what, if I'd played this in the 90s, it would have blown my mind, because it is just such a solid game. And I said this about Super Metroid. I didn't say it about Super Mario World, but I said it about Super Metroid. Like, super solid game, really impressive stuff. I'm really enjoying it. It's tough. There's hardly any item drops in terms of health for enemies, and that's something I'll get used to. But yeah, so far super solid. Loving it.
Yeah, this made my top 10 last year, and I like it a whole lot. It doesn't kind of break the upper echelon of my favorite Zeldas, and I think difficulty is a big reason as to why that is. I was save stating a huge amount, and I think to some degree that takes away some enjoyment from the experience, the fact that you're not playing it the way it was originally intended. But there are a lot of good things about Link to the Past, and a lot of extremely important things that were carried forward and obviously influenced a huge number of games in the modern era. So I'm very glad it exists, and we're able to play it these days in, I think, a setting that is better for modern gamers. So that's always good. So is there anything else you've been playing
Just
aside from that,
one
Ollie?
more game I wanted to talk about quite quickly, and that is the game you gifted me, MBZ, Monument Valley.
Well, I wouldn't say I gifted it to you. I'd say I went into a Starbucks and picked up a code and sent it your way.
You
But
did, you
sure,
did,
yeah,
you
we can
did the
put it there.
dirty work for me,
I
basically.
did,
Yes.
yes.
So this is the first iOS game I have played. like,
And I think we discovered the real reason to why Bally doesn't like iOS games. It's because he can never remember his fucking password to the iOS store.
it's for some reason it works the third time. I wasn't typing it any differently. It was weird, but anyway, yeah. So I've got really mixed views on this game. Um,
Interesting.
so the analogy I would use to sum up my whole experience of this game is that, and I think we've maybe used a similar analogy in the past, is that it's like trying to eat a really incredible steak with a spoon. like,
Okay.
it's I think the game itself is unbelievable. It is so impressive. Artistically, musically, gotta get that art music in there.
Uh-huh.
But mechanically, it's far more clever, even I'd say, than Box Boy, and I absolutely love Box Boy. I think this is a smarter
Wow.
game than Box Boy because
I think that's really interesting because though I think Monument Valley is smart, I think it is very simple in terms of figuring things out and in terms of its linearity. Like there is generally
mm,
a single path through,
mm,
and once you know what you're doing, I think that it's easier to figure stuff out than it is in Box Boy. I think Box Boy becomes way more
mm,
mechanically complex as things go on.
perhaps, but I'd like to use this example as an argument, and I hope you
Okay.
can remember this level because it is very distinctive, and I was
All
playing it
right.
earlier today. So, level 8, you start with a cube. It
Yes.
almost looks like a Jack in the Box or something. And the entire level is a case of you undoing flaps of this cube, folding them in again, moving your little dude about, sort of working out each bit of this cube, and then the cube sort of not explodes, but it kind of opens up to reveal a whole different world that you then rotate, and there's like fish floating around and everything, and it's just mind-boggling. Like I was just on the tube playing this, grinning massively at my phone, and like everyone else on the tube must have thought I was like texting some really attractive girl or something because I was just smiling at my phone, so happy with the world, just like wow, this level's amazing. Like it absolutely blew my mind, and I thought up until that level I would have completely agreed with what you had just said, that it is incredibly linear and quite simplistic. But that level I just thought was incredible, and like I've got a couple more levels to play, so maybe that it does get even better than that, perhaps. But I just thought it really worked.
So what are you talking about when it comes to control then? Because I personally think that it's really intuitive. I think the touch controls work extremely well, and the sliding and the moving it is designed for a phone, and I think it works on a phone. So your analogy about using a spoon to eat a steak kind of implies that you didn't feel that way.
Yeah, like I think the touch controls are done well, but I despise touch controls that you're having to do with your fingers. I just really hate it. I don't know. I can't get used to it.
Is it maybe because like you're basically invading the game space in terms of you're covering up the screen, you're not being able to see everything fully?
Yeah, that's definitely one part of it, and like I do think I completely agree with you that it would definitely be a more enjoyable gaming experience on an iPad. Um,
Absolutely. I think that's probably the optimal way to play it,
yeah,
and probably why I felt more different about the control scheme than you did, is you were on
definitely.
a smaller screen with an iPhone, so.
Yeah, so like I just don't like gaming on my phone. I don't think no matter, and I think this game is a perfect example that it's the system it's on and not the game itself. I don't have things against. I sounded like I was against iOS games, and I still am, but that's not because of the game itself. It's because of how you play them.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
just feel like this game is the perfect example that it's an incredible game. I absolutely think the game is fantastic. Exactly what you want, but I just cannot get used to how you play the game, and it just really frustrated me in that sense. And every time I played it through an amazing level, I was like, I wish I could just play this on like a 3DS or the Wii U or something. And maybe I'm wrong, because maybe, like, I think this is one clever thing, is that the art style is actually designed for something like an iPhone or an iPad, because everything is very vertical. All the lines, the majority of the lines and the structures are incredibly vertical, and the art style just works so well for an iPhone or an iPad that maybe in that sense it wouldn't work on another system. But I mean, obviously, it could have been designed ground up for another system, and I think that would have been a better game all around, in my opinion. But they've gone for iOS, and hey, it's a friggin' great iOS game. I'd highly recommend it. I said eating a steak with a spoon, but you know what? You're still gonna get to eat that steak.
Yep.
It's just gonna be a bit difficult, and that's all I'm saying. Like, if you want a really great steak, still get this game, because I have been really enjoying it. So yeah, definitely. Thanks very much for that one. It was a good experience, but I'm definitely not converted, if that's what you were.
Well,
hoping
I'm not
for.
sure that anything would do that task, Bally. But
No.
I'm glad that have the context, and that we've both played this, and
Yeah.
I think it's a great experience, and it does deserve all those awards and the accolades it got, because it is wonderful. It really is. So yeah, excellent, good stuff, Bally. A lot of stuff to get through there, and I'm sure you'll have more to talk about. You're continuing through Xenoblade, as we know, so we'll check back in on that eventually. But for the time being, let's move over to what I've been playing, and obviously, played the Mario Kart DLC with you. That was a fun time, and we had the tournament. I enjoyed that immensely. I also finished up a game that I haven't talked about, and kind of left off of uploading to my backloggery account, because I wasn't sure if I was ever going to finish it. And that's a game that goes by the name of Xeodrifter. So this was released last year on 3DS and on Steam, and it is a very kind of minimalistic Metroid style platforming, Metroid game. I'm not going to say Metroidvania, because it doesn't employ any Vania elements. It is just a Metroid thing, because it's sci-fi, it's set in space, shooting guns, there's no RPG elements, so we'll take that as the caveat. And it's made by Renegade Kid. If you don't know who these guys are, they are big Nintendo fans, and a lot of their indie games come out on Nintendo platforms first. So they made Mutant Mudds, they've made, I think, Moon Chronicles on DS, which was a first-person shooter in space, which they've now brought to 3DS. So they made a lot of really interesting independent titles, and Xeodrifter is the most recent one. And I'm really conflicted on Xeodrifter. I'm playing it on Steam. I didn't get it on 3DS, and I actually, funnily enough, won a copy of this game from Colin and Greg, who obviously formerly of IGN, now of Kind of Funny. In the first week of their live streams, they were giving away codes for Xeodrifter, and I was sitting on Steam basically with my promotion, or not promotion. It was the place where you input codes to activate a game on Steam. And I was just sitting there like laser focused, because Colin was reading them out real time. So I listened to every single one, typed it perfectly, entered, and I won. I got the game. So I was like, yes!
That never happens. Like, whenever you enter something, you never win. No one ever wins.
No one ever does. Someone else always gets it first. But I was just fucking on point that day, and I managed to nab it for myself,
Nice.
Which was really cool, because I wasn't really super interested in buying it, just from what I'd heard on RFN. Johnny Metz talked about it last year, and he said that it was really punishing, and not in a good way, like in a frustrating way. And I 100% absolutely agree with that point, because the problem with Xeodrifter is, I think it's very simple in terms of its design. It doesn't do anything too crazy. The power-ups you get aren't any, groundbreaking thing. But the problem is the checkpointing system, and the game basically demands you to go through a really long area, get to a boss. Obviously, when you're at the boss, you can fight it, that's a real challenge, and then afterwards you have to go through the area all the way back again and make it back without dying, otherwise you go back to the boss room and have to restart that and everything. So it just is an exercise in futility a lot of the times, when I'm almost at the boss, and I don't really have enough health to kill him, and it's just not a really fun thing where I'm like, okay, I could go in and I'll probably die, but I should probably kill myself, so I go back to the beginning, do a better run through this area, so I have better health at the end and I'm able to take him on and, have a better chance at it, right? It's this horrible loop, and so many times I was, I'd beaten the boss and I'd got to the end, and I start working my way through, I'm almost back to my ship, and fuck, I get hit by a thing, so I have to go back and start from, well, you don't have to replay the boss again, they're kind enough to checkpoint you after you beat the boss, but you have to start from that room again. I'm like, I just spent 10 minutes, 15 minutes doing this, and in the long scheme of things it's not that bad, but doing that consistently and being frustrated by it is so off-putting, which is the reason it took me 4 months to finish the game. I started it in January, and every time that kind of scenario hit me, I was like, nope, fuck you, I'm turning you off, and I'm not going back to you until I'm, cooled off.
You had a falling out with this game.
many times I had a falling out with it. And I will say that in the later stages, it gets way better, because basically you're finding health upgrades much more frequently. When you get your power-ups, then you're able to go back to previous areas, and you know that there's lots of stuff hidden away that you can use those power-ups to find, just like in any Metroid game. And I think the last kind of 2 areas, the 2 last bosses and everything, I beat them first time, I got through the areas no problem, but that was because I'd collected loads of health pips, and I was up to 12 or so, opposed to the 3 that you start with at the beginning. And it's not like enemies increase the damage they do to you. Every enemy will do kind of the same amount of damage. It's just the case of whether you have enough health to survive it or not. And early on in the game, you have fucking no health. So it's just it's a problem that I think many games face, is that the start is way too fucking challenging, and therefore kind of makes people want to give up before they get to the good stuff later on. And I think, eventually it turns around and it does some interesting, fun things, but Geodrift is a fucking frustrating game, and it's one of the most frustrating I've played, so you can try it if you like, but I don't know. I'm not sure I can recommend it, unfortunately. Yeah, it's not often that I'm a critic of Metroidvania games, because generally I'm fine with just, playing that structure.
I feel like you've now played so many that your tastes are more refined, and that you have a clearer idea in your head of what makes a good Metroidvania game versus what makes a bad one. And you've
absolutely
you're obviously kind of identified the flaws directly in this game.
Yeah, really, and I think another funny thing is that they have the EAD Tokyo problem, which is it's even worse. It's even worse than EAD Tokyo. You face the same boss every time.
Oh,
but I think it's interesting because they add a new mechanic and a new wrinkle every time. So you'll build up, eventually you will. So that's one of the cool things by the end game, is that I know all the old patterns so well that I'm able to dodge 90% of these moves, and that's partially the reason I was able to beat this, the last 2 incarnations of him so easily, is because I had already had that knowledge and that muscle memory, right, already just built into me. So they add a new thing, and then I'm like, okay, I just need to get around all the stuff I know how to get around, then I'll kind of deal with the new thing, and it is satisfying ultimately in the end, but I'm not sure I can recommend Geodrifter generally. Unless you get it for free on a live stream, in which case, knock yourself out. Have fun with it.
But you can't do that for every game.
Yeah. Well, it's on a Nintendo platform. I think it's worth mentioning because it's on 3DS. So some people might like to play. And I think, actually, it does a good job of... one of your power-ups is you can zap to the background. There's foreground and background stuff. They just don't do a huge amount of interesting stuff with that. It's there, and you can clearly tell it's there because the 3DS and the effect is in existence. But other than that, it doesn't make a huge difference. So I was fine playing on Steam. I didn't really miss out on much. So the last thing I want to talk about is I'm almost finished with Chrono Trigger. And last time I talked about how fucking awesome Chrono Trigger is. And I've been kind of general about it. I'm not really nailing into the specifics. I didn't really talk about the combat system, which I find kind of hard to describe. When you come across enemies in Chrono Trigger, it kind of seamlessly transitions. It's not a random battle thing. So, Bal, you know how in Pokemon, go out in the grass, a screen plays, it goes black, and then you're into the battle screen. In Chrono Trigger, you wander around, you knock into monsters, and then, people, all your party members will, move around, adopt their positions, and you're in the battle right
Xenoblade.
there. not like Xenoblade in the fact that you can't move them around the screen. They will be static on the screen,
Oh, okay.
but it basically seamlessly transitions from the map to the battle, as it's basically the same screen. It just brings up the UI and brings up the battle tactics. And Chrono Trigger was a really weird battle system to get my head around initially, because it's based around a kind of, I think it's called like an ATB gauge, which is like you have to wait for this blue bar to fill up. They use it in Child of Light. I think there are a lot of different RPGs that have used this system, but I think Chrono Trigger is probably one of the first, because it's a very old game. You have to, each of your characters has this blue bar, and as soon as it fills up, you can take an action. So once you've taken your action, you have to wait for it to fill up again. And obviously, you get spells later on, like the haste spell, which if you cast it, it speeds that blue bar up, so you can take more actions more quickly. But the way that you manage it is that when you have 3 party members, a lot of them can kind of combo together. So your main character, Chrono, uses a sword, and he does really powerful sword attacks. But you have another character, Luca, who is like kind of, she uses fire elementals, and her magic spells, she has fire ones. So if you wait for both of their bars to be full, you'll get the option to do like a combo special attack, which is like a fire spin. So you choose that, and Chrono starts spinning around, and Luca like puts fire onto his blade, and it's really, really cool. Like, there are so many combinations, because I think there are about 5 or 6 party members total that you can just kind of move around and have doing different special moves, and they all make sense, and they're all unique and interesting. So Frog, who you get later, and Marl, who's like your healer character, they both kind of use water and ice spells. So one of their special techniques is to combine 2 of those together, and each animation is unique. It all looks really awesome, and I just love that combo system. I think it's so interesting. And though like it takes up 2 people to do it, it's obviously going to be more powerful. There are enemies who are more weak to certain elemental attacks and to physical attacks, and it's so much customizability within that battle system, which I love, and it's really kind of making it stand out for me. It's a lot of fun to kind of mess around and learn new things. And really, you're not going to be getting those techniques unless you're using those party members. So one of the party members is this robot from the future, and I didn't really like him that much. He was not a super good healing character. I already had my main healer who I liked and kept, and he wasn't like super powerful, so I left him on the sidelines for a lot of the time. But now that I'm in the end game, each character has their own specific side quest. So I was going through his, and I was leveling him up a bunch, and because of that, I was learning new techniques with him and getting new abilities, so I was able to kind of employ him in a way that I hadn't before, and that's really great. It like encourages you to use the party member so that you get rewarded with these special combos, and it's really an awesome battle system. Have you seen any footage of how this plays out, Bally, at all in Chrono Trigger?
Not in depth. I've seen a little bit of just like reviews and things online, but I've not sort of had a breakdown of how that battle system works and how the mechanics compare.
The cast of characters I have to address as well, because they're so varied and unique, and a lot of kind of typical games are your male protagonist and kind of other male characters. There's not a huge amount of female representation. This game is so like completely ahead of its time. Like, there are 3 female party members. One of them's like a cave woman. She also has the highest attack stat in the game. So like this trope of the woman being the weaker physical character is completely knocked to the side. Like, she is insanely strong and one of my favorite characters. Obviously, I've mentioned the robot from the future. There's another dude who's actually a frog, so he's not really an actual guy. So Chrono's like the only standard male white protagonist that you have, and everyone else is so varied and unique and interesting, and they all come from different time periods. So you're like assembling this crack team from all across the history of this continent, and I just love that. I think it really lends so much character and charisma to the story and to the way that it plays out. And especially you get a lot more of that when you're in the end game stages, as I am, as you are going through each individual character side quest. And you're learning a lot more about their histories and their pasts and all that great stuff. So Chrono Trigger is, I'm so insanely happy that there is a like kind of more modern version available. I'm sure it holds up fantastically on Super Nintendo, but if you can play this game, play the DS version, because I think it is just the best one, and like this game has to be played. It has, like, you cannot call yourself a fan of video games if you have not played Chrono Trigger. That is fucking a definitive statement right now, Bally.
Oh well,
and
I'm done.
you need to play this game.
Have you decided
100%.
if you think it's better than Xenoblade?
Man, look, I have now, like, I feel like I'm in this throng of having played all the best fucking RPGs in the world in such a short space of time, and I need more time to kind of distance myself, right, from these games.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that Chrono Trigger, like its name, is so fucking ahead of its time. Like, it is kind of unreal how good this game is, and I think it's better than Super Metroid. I think it's better than Link to the Past. I think it's better than any other Super Nintendo game I've ever played. It's phenomenal, really, and I can't overstate that. So there is my ringing fucking endorsement for Chrono Trigger, and I hope more of you guys go out and give it a go, because just, yeah, blowing my mind. So, I think we are pretty much done with the video games that we have been playing the last couple of weeks. Join us after the break when we will be breaking down some more of your emails and discussing a whole bunch of other topics. So don't go anywhere, we'll be right back.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. It is that time again. It's time for emails, but as always, we're starting to run out of emails. So yeah, send them in, send all your thoughts, send all your hate mail. We want it now. We want to read it on the show, and the address is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Send them in. We love reading your emails. Great. So, without further ado, I'll get on to the first email from Bruno Garcia. Is there a game that is regarded as a classic that everyone says is a must-play that when you did play it, you didn't think held up as well as everyone else? My example is A Link to the Past. I tried playing it a while ago, but beat the first dungeon and had no desire to continue playing. On the other hand, just yesterday I beat Chrono Trigger for the first time and can definitely see why it's regarded as the best RPG of all time. As always, thanks for the great podcast and good luck with the new brand.
Well, thank you, Bruno. We appreciate that. And I feel this is really funny that this email coincided with this week of the podcast, because Bally just started playing A Link to the Past, and I, of course, beat Chrono Trigger. So the two games he references are actually very relevant to the conversation here. And I would agree with Bruno, obviously, with Chrono Trigger holding up incredibly well. Probably not so much Link to the Past, though, because I think that does also hold up very well. But Bally, do you have a game that is a classic that you don't think holds up that well?
Super Mario World.
I think this is probably the obvious answer, right? I think that's like the thing.
And I want to make clear that I've kind of, my position on 2D Mario has evolved. And it kind of evolved when I quickly finished off New Super Mario Bros. On the DS just at the very, very start of this year, actually. And that is that I think the New Super Mario Bros. Series actually fixes and streamlines a lot of the issues that a game like Super Mario World had. For example, the save points feel more frequent. I think the games in general are considerably easier, which I just think makes them so much more playable, because there's elements of Super Mario World that are just not fun. It's seriously tough at points. So I do think they evolve on that. And yeah, so classic game like Super Mario World, which I know so many people love, just doesn't hold up. And like I absolutely love Super Metroid, so that holds up well. And The Link to the Past, so far I'm really liking it. So out of those sort of three classic Super Nintendo games, I just think Super Mario World doesn't quite cut the mustard.
Yeah, I think for some people they call it the greatest game of all time. Like, I think it's Dan Reichert's favorite game ever. I'm not quite sure of that, but I think like a lot of people hold it in such high regard. And maybe just because we don't have the context of the time and when it came out and how revolutionary it was, because it was, Mario on the Super Nintendo for the first time, that I guess, that perspective is lost. And to some degree, that may be a big part of why people loved it so much, but I don't know. I have yet to play Super Mario World, so I can't really judge it at the current time, but maybe I will at some point. For me, I think the obvious one is the original Legend of Zelda. That game is heralded by so many people as an incredible, amazing NES game, like one of the blueprints for what adventure games would go forward and do. And while I can appreciate from a distance what The Legend of Zelda did back then, I think trying to go back and play it now is an exercise in futility and frustration, and one, as you've already heard me talk about frustrating games already on this episode, something I don't like to engage in very much. I go to video games for enjoyment and for relaxation and for just pleasure in general, and getting frustrated by them is a no-go. So that's the big one there, and I don't like going back to a lot of NES games. I could probably say the same about the original Metroid, which I think is also just as obscure and obtuse in a huge number of areas. But I think that's probably the big one there. Do you have any others, Bally? Can you think of any others, or would you agree with me with maybe some NES stuff?
Yeah, no, I absolutely 100% agree that a lot of NES games are incredibly difficult to go back to. I mean, the only sort of two that I've really kind of given a bash and had a really good time are games like Mega Man 2 and just that little re-release of Excite Bike in 3D that came out with the 3DS. I've had quite a good time with that. I mean, it's not as good as Mega Man 2, obviously, but it's good fun. And the little bits of Metroid, Zelda 1, Zelda 2 that I've played, they're just like, whew, that is some tough stuff. And ironically, I think that 2D Mario in that the NES time scale, like I think that game holds up well.
Yeah, the original Mario Brothers,
Exactly.
right? And yeah, definitely. I've actually beaten the original Mario Brothers, and I can confirm it's pretty good. It's very simple and it's kind of very bare bones as far as a video game goes, but that was the NES era, and that's what they were working with at the time, and it's very understandable. But absolutely, that's a classic that I could still go back to and could get enjoyment out of. So it goes both ways, and I think I think some genres adapt and develop better than others, and as far as 2D Mario goes, I don't think it's done super great things since back in the old days, but we'll see what Nintendo do. Mario Maker's coming up.
I'm ready to throw another classic under the bus.
All right, go ahead, Bally. Just crush people's dreams here.
Now, I think this is a really great game, but I don't think it's like as unbelievable as people say it is. And maybe I'm being harsh, but just Mario 64. Like,
Really?
yeah, I really did like it on the DS. As frustrating as it was playing that game with a D-pad, but yeah, I mean it's good, but just look at like the way that game's evolved and just Sunshine and Galaxy, they're just so much better in my opinion. And obviously Mario 64 revolutionized gaming, and I'm not taking any of that away from it, but I think going back to as a game to play in the present day and enjoy, I don't think it holds up too great, to be honest.
I don't know. I think Mario 64, especially my experience with it when we played it on DS, was just as good as I think, it was back in the day. And maybe, if I played it now, I wouldn't have that experience, but I feel like I like that game enough that I probably would stick with it. But sure, I mean, you can throw it under the bus. There are certainly people who do. And I think when it comes to classics, N64 games are rather easy to throw under the bus because of, aesthetic problems and frame rate issues and a lot of things just not necessarily surrounding the game design, but surrounding alternative aspects of the game. So that's very true. Yeah, I can't think of many others.
I'm surprised you didn't stick in. I didn't surprised you didn't stick the knife in Ocarina of Time just there, MBZ.
Look, I can't be too harsh here. Ocarina of Time is a game that I can respect a huge amount, despite the fact that I don't think it is as amazing as everyone
That's the
claims
same
it is.
opinion I have for Mario 64. I should make clear that
Well, there we
yeah.
go. Fair enough, fair enough. I was gonna go ahead and kind of throw Metroid Prime into the ring, but I haven't given it enough of that. Look, my experience
Now
with
we're
Metroid Prime
talking.
is limited to Metroid Prime 2, and I didn't enjoy anything that I played of Metroid Prime 2 back when I did.
I
So,
do look forward to the day you give one of those trilogy games a bash.
yes, well, it's
I'm
probably coming soon, so
intrigued.
we'll see.
Great.
Anyway, thank you, Bruno, for the email. Good stuff. Let's move on to the next one.
Next question is from Wilson. Hey, Bally and MBZ. Amazing podcast. I listen to it as I drive to uni. My question is mainly for MBZ. You mentioned getting into JRPGs, but I was wondering what experience you have with classic JRPGs, the Chrono Triggers, Final Fantasy VI's, the biggest classics. I'm personally trying to get into them, but find my best avenue is now mobile app versions, which have been modified specifically for them, since I don't have a Bluetooth controller to make emulation feel tactile. The problem is now that I'm playing on a mobile, I don't feel as attached or motivated to finish these long games. Now there's a first world problem. Keep up the great work, Wilson from Perth, Australia, not Scotland.
Interesting that Wilson realizes that Perth is a thing in Scotland, a place in Scotland. So appreciate that. Bally, I don't know if I could ever bear to play like a traditional game like an RPG on a phone. I know that lots of people out there I think back a while ago you said that your friend Shaq was playing Pokemon on his phone.
Another friend of mine came to me saying, "Look, I'm playing Pokemon on my phone." The other week, and I was like,
Really?
"Yeah." I was kind of like, "Wow, that looks
that
looks like horseshit."
Yeah, God, no, I completely understand that it's a bad way to play those games, and that's absolutely why you're feeling not motivated to finish them, is because that's a fucking horrible way to finish, to play an RPG in general. So I would, if anything, if you can't afford to go and buy the RPGs or find them anywhere else, try and just play them on a computer using emulation. And you may not have a controller, but keyboards are generally pretty fine for that stuff. So that's probably the better alternative. I would advise piracy over fucking mobile phone versions of RPGs, quite honestly. So yes,
And
that's
how
bad the situation
there's
is.
these things called the Wii U and the 3DS, and they've got a great virtual console.
Right, but he may not have access to all of those, and even then, not every classic game is available on the virtual console,
No.
so there are some that he would be able to go
I
back
tell
to.
you
But,
what, that new 3DS Xenoblade 3D, it's a pretty sweet RPG if you want to invest.
yes, well, I mean, he's talking about classic RPGs, right? And I feel that I'm a bit of a kindred spirit here with Wilson, in the sense that I have now decided to undergo that classic RPG overhaul, in a sense. I've gone back and I'm playing Chrono Trigger. I'm almost done with it, and man, what a great decision that was. If we've already heard too much of that in this episode already, but I fully intend to play Final Fantasy VI. I fully intend to go back and seek out some of these well-known other amazing Super Nintendo and even further on, maybe PlayStation RPGs that was really the heyday. And I think a lot of people who didn't grow up with those systems may have missed out on RPGs as a genre, and I think unless you're kind of, playing Pokemon with the Game Boy such as we did, you're not being exposed to many other JRPGs after the PlayStation era, because, get into GameCube and PS2, there's not a huge amount of those going around. The PS3 360 Wii generation was pretty horrible for them in general, and there are some now coming more frequently to the 3DS with Bravely Default, and the Vita has a bunch of great JRPGs, but when it comes to that era, if you missed out on it, then you really should go back and try and clear those classics out, and that is what I'm attempting to do here. I felt that it's a great things so far, and I've really enjoyed my time with what I've played of Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. I don't know when I'll get to that and what platform I'll play it on. I think it's on the Wii U Virtual Console. I also believe there's a GBA version. Do you remember, I think, Bally, on
Most
GBA they
likely.
released Final Fantasy.
There's a GBA version
they,
of so many SNES games and things like that.
Yeah. So that could be a possibility if that's a version of... Look, Nintendo have done stupid things before, and they keep doing stupid things, like releasing the GBA version of Yoshi's Island on the Wii U GBA Virtual Console, as opposed to the Super Nintendo version. Like, why does that make any sense? But in this case, with Final Fantasy VI, I think maybe the GBA version, a lot of people have said, is the better one, so I wouldn't be too opposed to them bringing that over and playing that. I feel like I am playing more JRPGs now and being exposed to more than I ever had in the past, and I like it, and I am very, very much becoming acclimated to the fact that JRPGs are one of my favorite game genres now. So it's something that I kind of expanded upon. I played some more modern JRPGs like Final Fantasy 13. I played Dragon Quest 9. I played Xenoblade, of course, and I'm playing some old classics now and kind of understanding where things came from. I'm interested, Bally, like if there's any RPGs out there that you have wanted to try or been interested in at all.
Well, the main one was definitely Xenoblade, because of... It's almost like all the things I love about it aren't necessarily RPG related, because I just love the story. And maybe that's unfair, because I guess story is a crucial part of RPGs.
Yeah, it is a big part, definitely.
So I absolutely love the story and the graphics and the art and the world creation is just unbelievable in that game. So those are the things I'm enjoying the most, and less so the sort of nitty gritty of the battles and things. Don't get me wrong, I love those. So that was definitely top of my list to try. After that...
Do you think there's a Final Fantasy game?
I think I need a bit of a break from RPGs after that, to be honest.
Right, but I mean, there are so many Final Fantasy games, and that's a whole series that you have never touched at all in your life before, and probably have
I
very
should definitely
little
try
experience
one day. I mean, you mentioned there'll be one or two on the Virtual Console. I'd definitely pick one up at some point. It's just... balancing long games with short games, I feel, is something quite important, so I don't get burned out. And in terms of long games I want to play after Xenoblade, I've got like a lot of Fire Emblem lined up in my mind that I'm definitely keen to play.
And I mean, Fire Emblem count as RPGs in a sense as well. So
yeah, they've definitely got huge RPG elements in terms of story and definitely battling and things. So yeah, Fire Emblem's my next RPG. I'm thinking probably Fire Emblem Sacred Stones. Try and finish that game after Xenoblade. But there's so many long games that I want to play, and I'm afraid the Final Fantasies of this world aren't that high up on my list. But definitely they're on the list. And one day, my favorite phrase. One day it will be done.
Yes, indeed. Well, yeah, thank you, Wilson, for that email. Again, another very appropriate email for the time and place, so I appreciate that. What have we got up next, Bally?
Our final email. Hi, Bally and MBZ. My name is David, and I'm from Sweden. My big passions in life are playing games and playing football. I've been listening to the show since episode 3, and I love it. But I'm not the biggest Nintendo fan. Don't get me wrong, Pokemon is one of my favourite games ever, but I prefer PC or PlayStation games such as Shadow of Mordor, Diablo, Skyrim, and FIFA, of course. So my first question is, are there any games like Shadow of Mordor, Diablo, FIFA on a Nintendo gaming platform? Should I buy a Nintendo console, and if so, what games do you recommend? I guess the other question kind of rolls into this. The other question I have ties into this a bit. The only Nintendo game I've played except Pokemon is Zelda the Minish Cap. I loved it. So do you think I should move on to other Zelda titles, and in that case, which ones?
Alright, interesting stuff here. I think a lot of the time we struggle to look through Nintendo's catalogue and find games that are of a similar cloth to the sort of traditional experiences you find on PlayStation and Xbox, right? you can't really find an analogous game to Shadow of Mordor, for example. You know, it's this dark, apocalyptic, open world kind of action game, and that sort of thing just doesn't exist on a Nintendo platform, unfortunate as it may be. So it's kind of interesting to try and puzzle out like what are those games, what are the mature titles that Nintendo have that maybe would appeal to David here. I think probably an obvious one on Wii U is Bayonetta 2, because that was previously on alternative consoles, and Nintendo obviously got the rights to it and made it exclusive, and turned out to be one of the best goddamn games on the whole system. So I would say that if you're looking for buying a Nintendo console, the Wii U is a decent shout, because not only do you have that, you also have Zombie U, which was a launch game, the Wii U's inception, and I think a lot of people enjoyed that as kind of horror fans, and it's a very kind of mature style game. And obviously, as he mentions, he liked playing Minish Cap. Zelda Wii U is going to be very different from Minish Cap, but I think when we're comparing it to something like Skyrim and Shadow of Mordor, as he mentions, that could also be appealing. So there are certainly a good crop of games on Wii U that he could potentially enjoy, which are just Nintendo based. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I
Barry?
mean, definitely, like, which other Zelda titles should you try? All of them, because they're all so good. Well, apart from Zelda 1 and 2. But yeah, honestly, I think Zelda Wii U is, everyone's so hyped about it. And obviously with
And I
the,
think if he buys a Wii U, he has access to the Virtual Console, so he has access to a bunch of Zelda games on there.
yeah.
And
And a very one of Nintendo's more adult franchises, Metroid and the Metroid trilogy. And like we were just talking about this before, MBZ, but you can now play every single Metroid game ever on the Wii U, apart from Metroid 2, which is on the 3DS Virtual Console, and Metroid Other M. All the others you can play on the Wii U, which is quite cool.
well, you could play Other M on Wii U just by putting it into Wii mode, so technically,
Yeah,
yes, you can
yeah.
still play that.
I meant
So
like downloading the Virtual Console.
right,
But yeah, no,
right,
absolutely.
have digitally. Yes, absolutely. The trilogy, the Metroid Prime trilogy, is available, and when it comes to like gritty, dark kind of games, that is probably the closest that Nintendo gets to that style. If you think about like in the GameCube era, I think Nintendo had a big push on trying to get those types of experiences on their system, but it wasn't necessarily Nintendo who were developing them, right? They got the exclusive for a time anyway on Resident Evil 4, which one of the most acclaimed games of all time, just horror experience, and many people love that. Eternal Darkness, of course, a lot of people remember fondly. So there are those experiences on old Nintendo platforms, but getting them these days, they are kind of very few and far between. Um,
I think my ultimate argument would be if you want those experiences, don't buy a Nintendo console. Like you have to want
right,
to play
exactly.
Nintendo games to buy a Nintendo console. I only played games like Assassin's Creed and I want to play Batman because they're there. It's not like how do I explain it? I my absolute main reason I own Nintendo consoles and I'm a Nintendo fan is to play the Nintendo games, and those are just sort of games on the side. Um, and yeah, if you want to stick to those, I would definitely not recommend the Wii U or the 3DS, to be honest.
Yeah, it's an investment that could not pan out for you. So think about it. Take a look at the games that we've mentioned, see if they're to your liking, and kind of look them up and kind of consider it. And then I'd say ultimately make a decision. Some people don't like Nintendo experiences, and that's fine. It's just a different audience, and you're catering to different things. So, yeah, I'd say, take your time with it, see, have a look, have a think, and then make a decision. But I guess that's probably going to close
Yeah.
us out for emails, Isabelle.
Yes, let us know how you get on, David, with your purchasing. And that is indeed all we have time for in terms of emails. But once again, the address, if you want to send an email in, is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That's thisnintendolife@gmail.com. So thanks for all those emails. We've got a few more to come next time. But like I said, send more in. We always need more. And we'll see you in the third segment.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to the show for our final segment. And as Bally kind of posited at the start of the show, we're going to be doing a little bit of discussion about the idea of games and sports, and a recent story that has been doing the rounds regarding some controversial things happening with games and sports, and maybe bridge that into a little bit of discussion about geek culture in the mainstream in general. So let's focus on this story initially, which happened a few days ago as at the time of recording. I should mention we're recording a little early for this show, so if there's any big news that happens in like the next few days and we don't cover it, that's why, because we're recording early. But essentially, there was a Heroes of the Storm tournament which was broadcasted on the sports network ESPN. It was on their second channel, ESPN2. If you don't know what Heroes of the Storm is, because I imagine a lot of Nintendo fans have no idea, they're not really paying attention to the PC space. It is a MOBA, which is, kind of League of Legends, Dota, this team-based competitive game, and it's made by Blizzard. It's a lot of people say that it's a kind of more casual version of those games, but essentially, ESPN2 broadcasted a tournament of this game, and as soon as this happened, Twitter just exploded with clearly a lot of sports fans who were confused and had no idea what was going on, and started basically slagging off video games in general and saying, what is this bullshit doing on my sports network?
Nerds, run for the hills.
Right, exactly. And a very well-known sports commentator, I guess, or pundit, I'm not sure what you would call him. His name's Colin Cowherd, and he basically did a very scathing video on the subject, and basically compared watching the tournament to sticking a gun in his mouth, and saying that he would probably rather do that, which, he's making a point, he's being extreme about it, but I think we just need to have a discussion here about this and our ideas. Bally, are video game sports? What is your take on this? What do you think?
They are not sports, not really in any way. And I think you showed me a video Total Biscuit did, and I think that he really hit the nail on the head where even within the world of sports, there are different labels for sports. So you have motorsports, and then something like poker you wouldn't call a sport necessarily, and it's more like a competition.
Right, and yet ESPN still broadcasts poker. They broadcast, as he mentions in that video, Magic the Gathering was being broadcasted on ESPN2 before. So, it may be just a question here, in terms of video games being sports and stuff, but the ESPN are clearly going for things which are going to bring in numbers, right? And it doesn't really matter, is it a sport, isn't it a sport? That's not the point here. If people are watching it, if people are enjoying the competition, then surely, that's the big deal. And I don't know, all these statements seem to be a little bit, I feel, ill-judged, and from a place of ignorance, and from a place of just, I don't know, it's not a very good discourse from, I feel, the sports fans' end of the argument, unfortunate as that may be.
I can. It's clear to see where sort of the tension is arising, and Total Biscuit also made the point that it is this straw man being built, and it's almost like a straw man being built by sort of the mainstream media or mainstream sport outlets, basically, who want to shoot down or knock back this idea that one day video games will become far more mainstream in terms of being broadcast on TV, and that people will be able to watch esports. And it's just interesting to see the ways in which, like, for example, that sports commentator, I've forgotten his name, but
Colin Cowherd.
Colin Cowherd. So he basically all of a sudden raised, like, he said the phrase, sort of, Harry Potter was the limit for me, and it's just kind of like, where on earth did Harry Potter fit into this whole argument? It was a bit weird, and like, it's obviously like the mainstream media have this one view of what is normal, what is mainstream, and then what is sort of geeky or what is nerdy, what sort of books or video games or fandoms that are created, even fandoms of, I guess, I don't know, One Direction or something. Like they're really adverse to the idea that there are these groups of people who love loving things, as Jeff Kanata would say. Like,
yes,
that
indeed.
is his description of what a geek or nerd is, and I think it's a pretty accurate one. It's just people who love loving things, and it's just interesting to see how the mainstream media just fights that back. And this idea of esports is, I completely agree with Total Biscuit. It's just a straw man that they want to just sort of stab in the back and say, look, no, it's not a sport now. Clear off our American football, our mainstream sports. Just back off.
Yeah, and the commentator was also talking about the fact how if they made me cover this, I will retire from this network. And it's almost like, why are you making that statement? Because where in God's name is anyone going to choose you to commentate a video game that you clearly have zero interest in and no idea about? Like, we were kind of discussing this earlier and saying, like, is that how the American system works? Is that they take commentators and ship them around different sports? Because that doesn't seem like a smart idea, right? You'd want the experts on the topic.
Yeah, someone tell us. We're a bit confused by this, because over here, you will never have like a football commentator commentate, I don't know, a game of rugby. It just never happens. I mean,
No.
by all means, we certainly have some sports presenters that can swap between sports, but they'll never commentate on different sports.
Yeah. So I think let's get back to the idea of the naming convention here, because I think this has a lot to do with it. The fact that they are positing competitive games as being called esports is part of why I think this is being such a big issue. And I think initially when people started using the term esports, it was because, these companies wanted video games to gain more mainstream acceptance, and perhaps by taking that idea of the competition and linking it more to traditional sports and having that moniker, they were hoping to do such things, and make it kind of break more into the mainstream and kind of chase down these big networks and all these different sports that are happening, which I don't think is the best way of going about it. And I think that the name esports is kind of a bad idea, and if they could just change it and name it as competitive gaming or something else, it doesn't really matter what they name it. I'm just not a big fan or advocate of the term esports. I think it is misleading, and I think it is not relevant, because the places that they're chasing are not places that sort of content is going to do well in anyway. This sort of stuff does fantastically on the internet in places like Twitch and on YouTube. On TV, there's not really any acceptance there, and there's no audience for it there. So why even go after it is kind of my point here.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. I don't necessarily agree with you that the naming convention is that much of a negative. Like, I think that it's exactly the same thing that where the term, sort of, like I was saying before, motorsport came from. Like, everyone can accept that racing car drivers are not athletes in the same way as, a footballer, a runner, someone like that. While they are athletes, they're not athletes in the same way. They're using different. God, I'm getting caught up in words here, but they are using different parts of their body to.
There's certainly physical exertion happening.
Yes.
There's athleticism required for motorsports racing and those kind of
Yes.
things, but it's a different sort of exertion
Yes.
is the key point here. And
And
I
I
mean,
think that go ahead.
no, I was saying you can potentially make the argument that that is to a degree necessary when it comes to dexterity, right, and dexterity of movement with
Yeah,
these
I mean,
competitive games.
yeah.
Certainly, when it is you're talking about MOBAs, that is a huge part of it. You need to be able to press buttons extremely quickly. It's same with StarCraft, and be able to react to situations. So you need to be mentally sharp. You need to
Mm.
be physically sharp with
No,
those
it is
movements.
physical because I think Giant Bomb were talking about it, or perhaps some other podcast. But like they're talking about how your body does actually deteriorate like in your early 30s to 40s, and you simply just can't keep up with esports players who are in their 20s anymore. Like you just physically can't do it because your twitch reflexes have just died basically. Like it's really, and that's just like not necessarily twitch reflexes, but obviously like footballers or soccer players, they'll have to retire in their early 30s as well, and that's just the way that's the sport has evolved. I mean, you'll obviously always get the one crazy player. Certainly in this country, the crazy player at the moment is Didier Drogba, who's like 37, 38, and still is a striker for Chelsea. Like, but that's really unusual. So that idea that you do have to retire early because your body deteriorates, that's really interesting. That you can actually make that comparison between sort of mainstream sports and esports.
Yeah, it's certainly curious that there is actual physical exertion happening in a video game. A lot of people would be like, "Oh no, the only thing that you get physical activity out when playing video game is doing Wii Sports because that's how the mainstream kind of views that sort of activity." But yeah, it is kind of a very interesting matter. I think if we want to kind of zoom out here to the more widestream thing, how long do you think, Bally, will it be until games have more of a mainstream acceptance, as perhaps now we're seeing with TV shows based around comic books and movies based around comic books and that kind of stuff, and other kind of nerd geek culture. Game of Thrones is one of the most popular television shows in the world right now, and that is one of the most kind of dense and nerd-centric fantasy genre novels like written in the last 20 years. So what are your thoughts here on how long video games will take to kind of reach that acceptance?
It's really interesting, and would definitely say there is almost this semi-renaissance of geek culture between things such as Game of Thrones and the numerous superhero films, especially Marvel films that we're getting at the moment. Between those two and the rise of video games, Game of Thrones, everything, it's there is some sort of movement happening, and as cynical as this sounds, I think that it's incredibly money driven. Like, now, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Was there the demand and now there's the money there, or was there money there and now there's the demand? I mean, maybe that's a bit tricky to try and quantify, but there's definitely a market for video games to become more mainstream because there's so much money in video games. Like, isn't it bigger than Hollywood now? The amount of money in video games. I'm sure I've heard that stat somewhere, or there's certainly some comparison that the amount of money in video games is just going up and up and up. And
I think probably profit-wise, people throw around statistics like video games being bigger than film and TV and music all put together, which is, I can understand why, because for one thing, products that are centralized around video games are far more expensive than everything that has to do with the film industry and TV and that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So, that's probably part of the reason. In terms of, numbers, like the number of people engaging with or interacting with games as opposed to watching movies and music, there's a long way to go, but certainly on the profit side, I would absolutely think games are a little bit ahead. So
I do certainly think this is maybe a bold prediction, but you know how there are the people who go to films for the sake of going to films. Like they don't really want to go to that film, but all their friends are going to the film, and they'll go along to the film just to be sociable and maybe talk about the film with someone afterwards. I certainly think that games are moving in a direction where I feel like there's going to become more and more gamers who just do it casually, and they don't really want to be playing games, but they just play games because other people are playing games, and it's sort of the cool thing to talk about with whoever you're with your friends or whatever. So I think there is a move towards that idea of games becoming mainstream.
I think obviously the way that this is most prominently happening is on the mobile devices, and we have talked about this before and how we're not a big fan of that stuff, despite there being some unique experiences there for certain, as we've mentioned Monument Valley already, this podcast and the last one. So that is probably where games are starting to get more mainstream acceptance. I'm just kind of thinking about when is it going to be a day where you don't have to label someone as they play video games. It's like you don't label someone as a film watcher. You don't label someone as a book reader. Those are just activities, media that people generally engage with. And I'm just kind of interested, how long will it be until that kind of moniker isn't needed and it's just something that people do, So
Yeah, that is definitely really interesting. And I mean, all the people playing these iOS games would probably not like the label gamer, and it's just like I think if you quantified the number of hours that they spend like on public transport playing those games versus even someone like me on a week where I might not have played many video games, they might even be out playing me in terms of number of hours. So how could they claim to not be a gamer? It's a bit hypocritical, I might say. But yeah, I think that there will come a time where games will be almost one and the same as films. They will be an experience that more and more people do. And that's partly because gamers are a very young audience in general, and those gamers are going to get older, and there's no reason to suggest why the young people underneath that age group won't play games, whether that's iOS or any other game system. So, I mean, there's only going to become more and more gamers. It's not like it's anywhere near going on a decline.
yeah, absolutely, and it's going to take its time. Obviously, as you said, the industry is still very much in its infancy. I think someone compared it to the fact that games at this point in time, if you compare it to films, like films were only just getting out of silent stuff, like only just kind of
Yeah.
in the 25 years or whatever it's been. So I think this industry has done pretty well for itself considering that.
I mean,
Yeah.
when books first came out, people were skeptical of books because they thought that people would stop talking to each other. They would stop socializing because they would be able to get all their information from books. And everyone reads books now, so I mean that turned out fine. And it's just people are skeptical.
Right, and the core idea here as well is that any kind of new media is going to be demonized, and we have
Yeah.
seen video games be demonized for a very long time. Before that, films. Obviously, people were scared that films were going to, influence people and have a bad impact on everyone, and TV and everything before that. They're just the current scapegoat, and until I guess something else emerges to be the new scapegoat, then that's how it's going to be. Yeah, I think we have done a good discussion here of the kind of merits and unmerits of games and their sporting relevance or not. And yeah, in general, I think it was a good discussion. So I think, yeah, anything else to say on the topic, Bally, or should we close this show out?
Do let us know what you thought of this topic, because I mean this is a topic that's I've heard on numerous podcasts and other media. So yeah, let us know what you think of these third segments that we come up with, because if you like something we'll do more of it, and if you don't like something we'll probably do a little less of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about that give and take. So anyway, let's close this show out. You can find us in various places on the internet, so how about we plug those? I can be found on Twitter. You can find me at Lordnbz. You can also follow me on the Miiverse. Lordnbz is my name there as well. And I don't know what video game I'm playing next, but hopefully it's something that includes the Miiverse so I can post about it. But we'll see. How about you, Bally?
Metroid.
Mm. Mm.
My name on Twitter is Ballyman91, BALLYMAN91, and that is also my name on the Miiverse. And I'm going to be trucking on with a link to the past. And then, you know what? I think I'm finally going to finish the game I started when I bought it with my Wii U a few months after launch, and that is New Super Mario Bros. U.
Yeah, that one's been hanging over your head for a long time, Bally. Just not
A
come back to
very
it.
long time, and I'm so near the end as well. It's so stupid, but anyway,
Yeah,
yeah, I'll
might
give
as
that
well.
a
Might
go.
as well close that out.
But also
But
follow the podcast Twitter account. Very important. That will give you all the updates on everything that we do. That account is TNL Podcast. That's TNL Podcast. Go follow that.
yeah, we always put up links to videos that I do and Bally does with me sometimes. There was recently a Mario Kart tournament we streamed, and I put that full thing, 50 minutes, up to my YouTube channel. So you can see that there as well, and get all the updates from us by following us on the Twitter. You can also get the show in many, many ways. You can go to iTunes and download us. You can subscribe on iTunes, and you can also rate us on the iTunes Music Store. That is a good place for us to get feedback from you guys and to push us up the rankings and hopefully get more listeners. So do give us a review. Haven't had any recently, but we would love to get more of those, and we will shout people out as soon as they do that. We have also got different places you can listen to us, such as SoundCloud. As I mentioned before, SoundCloud I have not got like a full premium membership to, so I can only post one episode on there, and then it has to be deleted and the new one goes out. So the newest episode will always be on SoundCloud. You can also find us on Stitcher, and all of our episodes are available on iTunes, so you can go into the backlogs there and find any of the old ones if you need to. Anything else, Bally? The email address maybe for a plug at the end here. What's the email address?
Yes, the email address is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Send in all your hate mail. We love it.
Sure we do. Sure we do.
And some questions, that would help as well.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good. So yes, thank you once again for listening to the show. We will be back at you in a couple of weeks' time, and but by the time I come back, I'll be done with exams, Ballet, and it will be the full ramp up to E3. We are going to get that hype train rolling. Things are going to be happening, and I'm very, very excited.
You know what else we might have here in the UK next time we come back?
We may have a new system,
a new
of
government.
But
yes,
we'll
yes.
see about that too.
How
I'm sure
exciting!
That's Bally's favourite thing. I'm sure that we will talk a little bit about that perhaps on the podcast, but not too much so as to drive everyone away.
Let's make a segment.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you very soon. Goodbye. The musical interludes used in today's show were a jazz rendition of Big Blue from F-Zero from youtube.com/Tefair and a jazz remix of Wonderful World from Chrono Trigger from youtube.com/SSharfy1. Ready, Fred? Oh, crazy, I didn't call.
This is a funny thing.
Okay.
So me and Charlie were just talking. We're just saying like we've not been on night out in ages, and we were remembering when we all dressed up as the members of Kiss.
Yeah.
And he was just, we should do that again sometime. And like we were just listening to some Queen that afternoon. I was like, Charlie, you know what would be funny? It's like, what? We could both dress up as Freddie Mercury from different from different eras.
Oh my God,
he's
that's
like,
great.
wow, that's an amazing idea. So the two main eras are, you know, the 80s with the white trousers, yellow jacket, mustache.
Uh-huh.
And then the other era is the earlier, like in the early 70s, where he's got like the cat suit with like the diamonds on it.
Oh, jeez,
and he has no mustache.
Oh, God.
And so we said, like, right, we'll agree that we're both going to be them, and then when it gets nearer the time, we're going to flip a coin. and then like the loser has to be the one in the 70s.